But we start with our colleague and friend, Katy Tur at Trump Tower. Katy, this is where we first saw you in June of 2015 as Donald J. Trump was coming down the escalator to declare his presidency with some of the same inaccurate and very controversial rhetoric about migrants and others that we heard today. And this is when you first started covering him full time 9 years ago. Katy?
Yeah, what a 9 years it has been. In many ways, so familiar and so completely the same, talking about immigration and migrants then, talking about immigration and migrants today. This is a surreal moment to be here in Trump Tower because this is literally the scene of the crime. This is what he was convicted for in a Manhattan courtroom, 34 felony counts for falsifying documents for a scheme that was hatched 24 floors above my head, 26 floors above my head. Donald Trump, David Pecker, Michael Cohen in a room deciding to use AMI, the National Enquirer, to catch and kill stories, to go after Donald Trump's opponents in the presidential race and to bury stories that are negative about him, including stories from women, including one of Stormy Daniels. And that's what he was convicted for. And today, after that conviction, he came back here and held a news conference. There is a heaviness to this lobby that I've never felt here before, and I've been coming here for a long, long time. The doormen, all the same, but they're not smiling as easily as they once were. He had a crowd of supporters here. They looked to be Trump Organization employees because they came out from the elevators behind me. There was a forced enthusiasm, I think you could argue, from some of them. Donald Trump went through his campaign highlights. You know, they've been the same now for 9 years. But there was something forced about the way he was giving it as well. Like this conviction has actually gotten to him. There is a significance to him for what this means. It's not a civil fine, and granted the civil fines were extremely large. This is a criminal conviction by 12 of his peers here in New York City for the way that he did business. When he was talking about falsifying records, it was almost as if he took personal offense to it. On the subject of immigration, I think it's important to note today, and he talked about how immigrants are coming in and more terrorists than ever are coming in. Nothing that is based in evidence in terms of the terrorists, and nothing that's based in anything that we can confirm or report. But on the subject of immigration, there was a fix in Congress. Republicans led this fix in Congress, a compromise in the Senate that leans Republican, that Republicans wanted, demanded for years. The Democrats made heavy concessions, so much so that there were some Democrats who said they couldn't possibly vote for it, and President Biden was getting a lot of flack from the left for this immigration bill. It never passed the Senate, number one. It went to the floor for a show vote so Democrats could show how Republicans weren't supporting it. It would never have gotten to the House floor because Donald Trump intervened and told Republican lawmakers he didn't like it. He didn't want there to be an immigration bill because he wanted to be able to run on it. This is a crisis of his own making, or at least a crisis that he has been unwilling to help. This is a bill that would have allowed President Biden to shut down the border. It didn't go anywhere because Donald Trump didn't want it to go anywhere. Ladies, I was also in court yesterday as this verdict was read. I wanted to see his face as it was read. I wanted to see the reaction from the former president. And I watched him, and he was stone-faced. He barely made an expression. As the jurors walked by, he looked at every single one of them. None of them that I could tell looked at him at all. But there was something to the expression, and again, it's the same expression we've seen from him, the unmoving, kind of a scowl, the heavy lipped hang. But there was something about it that didn't seem as natural as it had in the past, as confident as it had in the past. And you just got to wonder, I know Donald Trump is still running for president. He says he's going to continue to fight. I wonder how much of the fight is really still left in him after all of this.
Katie, that's such an important question. Or will it morph to anger, and that will manifest itself on the campaign trail? That will manifest it as he continues through. Obviously, he has to go to an interview process. There is going to be pre-sentencing reports written, and then he will be sentenced. So take me back to your observations today, because to those of us who are sitting and watching it on TV, there's a sameness to it, right? Exactly as you pointed out, railing on some of the same issues, making many of the same misstatements and outright lies that he has made in the past from the very beginning, meandering, hard sometimes to follow exactly where he was going. And yet, I do think with Donald Trump, and you and I have talked about this before, his mood, his reaction can inform how he deals with people, how he deals with issues, how he deals with what's facing him. Who's the Donald Trump you saw today versus the guy you saw come down that escalator, who most people thought didn't have a snowball's chance in hell of becoming president of the United States?
I will make one small correction. I was not there for the announcement. I started covering him like
That's
2
right.
days later. I was in London. I was a forward correspondent. I came 2 days later, and I started covering him. So I was not there for the actual escalator announcement, but I was there every day after that. And I was here a lot. And my first big interview with him was just around the corner in the Trump bar here. The Donald Trump back then was an outsider candidate who had, a very small chance. Nobody believed in him. He was... he was acting as if he had nothing to lose. And then when it started, going, he built confidence. He was always confident, but he built real confidence, and he got angrier and angrier. And he started rallying his base around him with that anger, with that vitriol, using it to his advantage, wielding it. And he's been doing that for 9 years since. Today, he has that same instinct in him, but he didn't seem to be as committed to it as he had, at least personally committed to it, as he had in the past. There was one point he lifted his arms up and he just dropped them at his shoulders. I've never seen him at his waist. I've never seen him do that before. It was just resigned. That being said, it's almost as if he doesn't need to be wielding the power as forcefully as he once was. Again, it's 9 years. He's aged. We've all aged. But the apparatus around him, the system around him, the people around him, are pushing forward with that regardless of him at this point. That there is a well-oiled machine of anger and vitriol that the Trump campaign has been using for years now, with fundraising emails, with Truth Social posts. Truth Social posts, by the way, that aren't always coming from him. They're coming from his social media manager. They know what to say, and the people around him know what to say. His allies know what to say. There was a reason why all of the Republican lawmakers and his allies out there said the same thing when this verdict came down, that it was corrupt, that it was a banana republic, that this was not a real court system, that Joe Biden was behind all this. They all know the talking points by heart. But I want to leave you with one thing, because I think this is really interesting. Donald Trump came out here today and talked to the press and talked to these cameras alone. There was no family members by his side. Eric Trump and Lara Trump were standing off to the side of this lobby, but there was nobody standing next to him. And there were no Republican lawmakers here either. There were no potential vice presidential candidates. We've seen so many of them travel to court with him, stand outside, give press conferences, wear the same suit and tie. Yet there was nobody here today. Where were Elise Stefanik and Doug Burgum? Where was Matt Gaetz? Where was Lauren Boebert? Where were the people that we've seen around him day in and day out? Why were they not here? Why on the first full day where Donald Trump has been convicted of felonies, becoming the first president in history to ever be convicted of a crime, why was he standing here alone? I think it's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to it, but it is a remarkable image. It is a symbolic image for him to stand here by himself today without the phalanx of supporters that he normally has.
Lots of reaction, but no one showing up. Katie Tur, you're going to make your way back to us, which we are happy to have you here when you can get here. So thank you very much. We will see you soon.